This is one of the recipes in Recipe Lister. It does not give you a ton of recipes, but it does include a recipe for a bread omelet. You know,
Appetizing.
make and enjoy.
Chris does some baking. Chris, have you ever baked a bread omelet before?
I do dabble in baking. I can't say I've ever made a bread omelet. No.
One of the people who is attending this week anonymously posted in the Q&A that they're seeing a ton of Tampered Chef at one of their clients, and that does not surprise me at all. If something ranks highly in Red Canary, it means that it is probably profoundly prevalent across the board. Now, my question to you, Steph, is this bad? Is it overtly malicious, or is it just sketchy? All right, so as I said, Keith and Dave are taking the day off, although apparently not, because Keith is watching us. Great.
Lurking in the chat.
So we've got the B team out here today. I'm Brian. You guys probably know me from coming on Office Hours a bunch of times. I'm on the community team here at Red Canary, where I do public research things. Here with Steph Rand, who you all obviously know. I want to reintroduce yourself, Steph.
I am a senior Intel analyst on the Intel team. I do intelligence things.
Great. I love intelligence things. And Chris, is this your first or second appearance on Office Hours?
Second. I helped do the news last week. Senior information security researcher, also on the community team. Happy to be here again.
All right. Let's see if we can get these slides to work. Uh-oh. Come on now. There we go. All right. So, per tradition, we are going to start today with the news. As you guys may or may not have heard, there was a little bit of an AWS issue yesterday. Also, I think last week news broke about an F5 security incident, so we'll talk about that. And then we've got a couple things that Red Canary has been working on or publishing about over the last couple of weeks. We'll try and jump through those three things relatively quickly before we spend the bulk of time with Steph talking us through the monthly intelligence insights. So without further ado, AWS. So yeah, I jokingly said, if you noticed, you may have noticed, I have a hard time believing that anyone didn't notice that AWS was down yesterday. And jokingly, yesterday early on, I was Googling around trying to figure out what had caused the outage, and no one was saying anything yet. But everyone was making jokes about, how it was probably DNS.
Always.
And sure enough,
DNS.
it was a DNS failure that caused the outage. So, and the funny thing was, as I was going through just my normal day yesterday, obviously anytime I couldn't access something on the internet, I was like, I wonder if this is due to the AWS outage. And the oddest thing that I encountered yesterday was that somebody sent me one of those free share links from the New York Times. And the article itself was working, but the free share link wasn't, which made me think I wonder if there's these free shared links are stored in some sort of AWS storage thing that allows access to it. But who knows? I had conspiracy theories about every website that would not resolve yesterday relating to AWS. So tons of stuff was down. It appears that everything is mostly better now, although I'm still seeing some complaining about, AWS being potentially still a little bit grumpy. But the thing that I mostly want to talk about is this F5 security incident. Chris, you want to give the kind of high level broad brushstrokes on this thing?
I mean, it's unfortunately kind of the same story as whenever a nation state actor secures long access to an organization, and that's seems to be exactly what happened here. I mean, a year plus. I'm seeing some places say early as 2023 access to source code, information about vulnerability stolen. I don't know. We were talking about how doom and gloom we want to be here, Brian.
Well, so it's funny. I find the whole thing to be very, I wouldn't say confusing, but unclear at the moment. So yeah, like you said, like some people are reporting this has been, these adversaries who most people are saying Chinese, like CISA didn't say China, F5 didn't say China. Uh, but that's what the rumor is. People are saying 2 years. F5 for their part says August of this year. But yeah, the interesting bit here is that they seems to have been mucking around like in the internal bug repository, right? So the place where people report in bugs to F5. I didn't have time to look through like all of the vulnerabilities. However, some of the third-party reporting and podcasting that I've been listening to about it is saying that like most of the bugs are being reported as like denial of service bugs. Which I don't know. It would seem like this is a lot of hubbub for some denial of service bugs. So I honestly don't know, but I would encourage people to check out the CISA advisory. Uh, I open question, like the CISA advisory basically is like, hey, government, fix this, figure out what's exposed to the internet, and like as you can see here, there's at least 250,000 plus big IP instances exposed to the internet. Like the government's like, figure out if yours are and then patch them. But like the government is shut down. So I don't know what impact that has. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think it's like a lot of medium severity bugs, which is not good. But also you can kind of argue that doesn't really matter when they allegedly have access to like foreign states get access to source code. It's sort of like, okay, then they can perform all the static analysis they want,
Yeah. I mean, I think the key bit of like operational advice here is just like patch this stuff as quickly as you can, because we really don't know the extent of this. Like people are comparing it to SolarWinds. I don't really think it's like SolarWinds, because SolarWinds like kind of happened, like F5 came out and said we were breached. Like it kind of didn't happen exactly like that in the case of SolarWinds. It was like other bad things happened that got worked backwards to us realizing that the origin of these other bad things that were happening was the SolarWinds breach. So like the supply chainy bits happened, and then we figured out that it was because of a breach that took place at this third-party vendor. In this case, like F5 has come out already. We don't know what the follow-on consequences are yet, or if there will be. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of information out there. Like Zscaler put out a blog. The CISA blog is very good and straightforward and explains like the potential consequences of this. So go out, read up on that stuff, and try to update as quickly as you can. So,
make sure those things aren't exposed to the internet.
Yeah, I mean, how many times is a breach started by something being exposed to the internet that ought not to be or doesn't need to be? All right, before we dive into the sort of meat and potatoes of today's episode, just a couple of interesting things that Red Canary has published recently. Everyone should go check out this Jesse Griggs blog about the ways that adversaries are abusing AI command line interface tools. Chris, did you work on this with Jesse? I can't remember.
I did not actually, no, but he is going to be here next week to discuss it. And I'm kind of hoping that he gets into like a little bit of the whole like interface tools being used sort of fuel supply chain attacks. I feel like that's sort of a thing I've seen like a lot lately. So there was like an Auth0 blog about this a couple weeks ago too that might be worth reading.
If he's going to be here next week, then we won't steal his thunder beyond just sort of pointing out like these AI cloud hosted AI tools are just like any other cloud resource, and probably can and will be abused by adversaries. One last thing is Microsoft, I think last week, announced that they had revoked 200 fraudulent certificates that the folks behind CleanUpLoader, which is what we call it, some people call it Oyster, they were using these fraudulent certificates to like sign the binaries. So they revoked all of those. These malware, Oyster, or CleanUpLoader, depending on how you name it. I think, Steph, we were seeing some of them come in the form of like fake MS Teams updates, right?
Yeah, so we're still seeing it as when we were last seeing it, which was, like you said, before early October. We were seeing the WinSCP download lures through like malvertising, and we were also seeing fake Teams downloads. So not like phishing through Teams, but like malicious websites and ads saying, "Oh, you can download Teams here," but it was not Teams. It was CleanUpLoader or Broomstick or Oyster, depending on however you track it. So,
Yeah, and to underscore that point, like we have not seen it since early October, which is around the time frame that Microsoft says it revoked all these certificates. Also, public service announcement: when you find, malicious signed binaries, report those things to the folks that issue them. It works, right? This is proof that it works. I know for a fact that our colleagues, I won't name them since they didn't ask to be named, but I know for a fact that at least one person on our detection engineering team and one person in our Intel team reported a handful of these certificates to various certificate authorities. So like they listen, they take these, they revoke the certificates. Microsoft revoked 200 of them. All right, that's enough time on the news. Let's get into it. Come on. All right, Steph, lead the way. Tell us about the monthly intelligence insights.
All right, so for October, a couple things I want to highlight. We have a new threat that is debuting and also is hitting #1, and we're going to talk more about Tampered Chef today. CleanUpLoader is still in our top 10 because we saw enough of it in September for it to hit #5 on the list. That'll probably change next month if I were going to shoot from the hip, but it's going to be on the top 10 for September's activity. And then I had a couple of other things make it onto the list for the first time, which we always like to call out those newcomers. Akira is making its debut on our list in 8th. We haven't seen any other ransomware groups make the top 10 in a very long time, so that's notable. And also, a lot of the things on this list are thanks to Paste and Run. Y'all know how much I love talking about Paste and Run. Paste and Run is still super active. I know that Net Support Manager is on the list thanks to Paste and Run. So is Latrodectus, which is its first time in the top 10 since May. And Radamanthus, which has been around for a while, and we've talked about Radamanthus before, but we saw enough of it as a Paste and Run payload for it to debut on the top 10 this month as well.
Yeah, shout out to Steph Rand, who did 15 minutes of material on Paste and Run at ATT&CK last week. So go find that talk if you want to learn a bit more about Paste and Run. What's this Tampered Chef business?
This is interesting. And I'm sure that this is something that y'all have seen or seen similar things to. There's been a lot of really good OSINT publications about this. So Tampered Chef is this adware, I'm gonna put adware in quotes, we'll get into that. It masquerades as a desktop application, and usually we've seen it as recipe savers, which is why it's called a Tampered Chef. That's how it kind of first appeared on the scene in June of this year. Also as calendar helpers. So Calendramatic is another application name, executable name that has been used that has really similar activity. We're currently tracking both as Tampered Chef, but that may change. As y'all know, we're always looking for better ways to track activity. This may, in the long term, be better tracked as a technique than as a specific named threat. But for now, we're tracking this activity as Tampered Chef. And so it's interesting how it's presented to users. So it appears to users as an ad in a sidebar or a banner, sometimes on websites that are like promoting the service or promoting the application. So you'll find a website that's like a news article promoting this recipe lister, and then you'll get a banner ad encouraging you to download it. And it does download an application to the desktop, currently Windows only. At least for recipe lister in particular. And once it does that, you do get something. So as y'all know, sometimes we'll talk about threats that don't even attempt to masquerade as anything. This does attempt to masquerade as an actual program. If we go to the next slide, Brian, I thought this was very interesting. This is one of the recipes in Recipe Lister. It does not give you a ton of recipes, but it does include a recipe for a bread omelet.
Appetizing.
Make and enjoy.
Chris does some baking. Chris, have you ever baked a bread omelet before?
I do dabble in baking. Can't say I've ever made a bread omelet. No.
One of the people who is attending this week anonymously posted in the Q&A that they're seeing a ton of Tampered Chef at one of their clients. And that does not like surprise me at all. If something ranks highly in Red Canary, it means that it is probably like profoundly prevalent across the board. Now, my question to you, Steph, like, is this bad? Like, is it overtly malicious or is it just sketchy?
All right, go to the next slide. We'll talk
Oh,
about
here
it.
we go.
All right, so what is it doing? It's doing a lot of things that make us feel not good about it, even though ultimately there's been no observed follow-on activity. So one of the most interesting things that it does is it uses this technique, this steganography technique, which I honestly have not seen this many conversations about steganography since I was in school, like getting my IT degree. But they use it to hide commands in returned recipes or returned calendar extensions. They put these characters in the JSON blobs that can be decoded and executed. So this is a really great example from GuidePoint that they had in their article on this activity, specifically about the calendromatic activity. So you get this JSON blob that looks just like, oh, we're passing in this holiday, but it includes Unicode dashes, different kinds of Unicode dashes that they were able to, in this example, show that it forms this binary sequence for hello. So the application can pull that out and read that. This is not an actual like example from Calendromatic, but this is an example of sort of how that works. In Recipe Lister, it's passing these JSON blobs with characters in the recipe text, so it can pass them back and forth. Really interesting technique. Surprisingly, I mean, this is you don't expect to see this kind of thing in just adware, which is why I'm using the quotes just adware. This is pretty deliberate.
Yeah,
This is
and I think that's like in my brain when I think about like whether something is sketchy or something is bad, it kind of comes down to like, is this a problematic thing privacy wise, or is it doing things that it like that no legit software should be doing
Mhm.
on a machine? And this definitely seems to be crossing that line, right? Like
It does.
redirecting browser traffic seems like a no-no.
Mhm.
Modifying browser settings seems
Was
like a no-no.
Yeah,
was
the
was
incorporating methods to evade sandbox environments.
That's a no-no.
No, no. Chris,
Okay,
what were
but
you
you,
gonna say?
yeah,
oh
go ahead, Chris.
I was gonna say this was at one point marked as like a PUP, potentially unwanted program, correct? And then we saw all this stuff and we're like, actually, this is worse. This is like a little more sus than we thought, right?
It did. It was funny. Like around the same couple of days in June, so like June 4th, 5th, 6th, we saw it. A bunch of other researchers saw it. A lot of people published on it simultaneously because this technique is unusual, and also the volume of it was really, really high. One of the things that I thought was interesting about Recipe Lister in particular is there was some evidence that other researchers shared that it was intended to target potentially healthcare workers by promoting itself in those news articles as something to help with nutrition and health, which I thought that's pretty sinister.
Yeah, someone in the chat posited or perhaps hypothesized that, you know, it could be sort of a proof of concept. And we kind of think about that a lot where we see threats that like behave outwardly like pups, like adware, but inwardly behave much more like malware. This certainly isn't the first time where we've had sort of uh, an adware like threat that does malware things
Yeah.
that are they're very concerning. Like I want to say like good, I'm gonna mess this up going back in time, but like even like super highly prevalent things, like I want to say like Chrome Loader back in the day was a bit like this.
Hmm.
And it's always something that we kind of struggle with and also have to explain away, because people will ask like, why are you, like when we create these lists, we try and limit them to be things that are malicious and suspicious. That's what we focus our, like we detect enormous amounts of like potentially unwanted programs and adware and stuff that we don't talk about, right? Like we're not on here talking about caffeine being our number one threat, because we're not super concerned about people using mouse shakers, even though we do detect them because they are kind of problematic. But yeah, we a lot of times we end up sort of classifying these things more on the malicious end, even though they're not quite, super malicious. But yeah, like the idea that it's a proof of concept, like in theory, maybe, but we don't really have any evidence of it at this time. Um,
I will say, after Raspberry Robin did nothing for a very long time and then was very, very bad, when it did start doing things, when we started to understand what it was doing, that has made me a little bit paranoid about well-designed threats that do nothing. But as we've discussed before, sometimes you've got really, really good tradecraft and they really want to drop a coin miner.
yeah, and I
The
saw
environment,
that
you know?
that that's a great example, right? The Raspberry Robin thing, because that like kind of validated the way that we handle a lot of these things, because we had basically been saying like it's a worm, some sort of USB worm. To what end, we're not sure. And then I think like Microsoft and a bunch of other vendors then came out and started writing about like how it was being used in the delivery of other threats. And then it eventually became part of the group of threats that we kind of collectively refer to as ransomware precursors.
Mhm.
Um,
I'm
all
not
right,
saying this
so
is like that, but it is an example of something that's well designed, that's intentional, that's trying to be deceptive. It's widespread, and the fact that it is not doing anything that we see yet does not make me necessarily feel any better about it.
all right, we have got some questions now.
Mhm.
I'm going to go in the order that I found them. So first question, how much would enterprise browsers like Island mitigate this threat? I'm going to go ahead and speak up. Do you know anything about Island stuff?
I don't. I do
Okay,
not.
so I don't either. My I, I don't know any much about enterprise browsers generally. My past advice for all these things would be like run uBlock Origin, but that's kind of been defanged. Um, so I'm not entirely sure, like other than like turning off, like running like no script or turning off JavaScript or something. I don't know exactly what you would need to do to sort of mitigate these things. So I guess the classic answer for Jim Moore's question is it depends. I'd need to know more about the Island browser.
Hmm.
A good token, word of advice is probably not to store any valuable credentials in your browser. That might be a good thing not to do.
Hmm. One of the interesting things that you'll find if you're looking at this online is currently there's a lot of interesting articles that are saying that this is a similar set of activities. So you've got Tampered Chef, Calendramatic, and then you'll see a couple of other names pop up in the same articles. And those are currently Just Ask Jackie and Bow Loader is another one that is currently floating around. And I think this is really interesting because all of these are adware threats that are in some cases more than others. Like, for example, Bow Loader is more browser related in a lot of ways, but it's complicated. It's complicated, especially when we don't have a lot of really good additional information about what kind of the long-term schemes are for some of these things. And I think it's always really interesting when sort of the security community in general, we start looking at these really prevalent high volume threats, trying to tease them out and pull them apart. And it's complex. This isn't a red canary struggle. This is a security struggle, especially as more and more threats do move into the browser and do move away from more traditional kinds of executables being like downloaded and delivered. But
Uh,
I just think it's interesting. We're doing a lot of reading about it now, and so I'll include some of those details in the insight when it comes out on Thursday.
I want to circle back to something you said that's not related to this, but
Okay.
first, someone also like kind of suggested the idea that this could be kind of like an identity broker situation. My sense is that if it was, we would know that, like we would have some trace of cookie chicanery going on, or at least some sort of evidence that they were attempting to do some sort of like credential theft, which I don't think we have any evidence of that I know of, at least, right, Steph?
Not at this time. No, we don't have any evidence of any additional follow-on activity or payloads or command execution or what it might be um, sending out of the environment. We don't have any additional details.
Yeah, and then by way of mitigations, Dash in the chat suggested uBlock origin. I mean, like that may work some places. If you're using Chrome, it doesn't work as well anymore. I think Google pretty much just shut that down. uBlock origin Lite works pretty well. I've never stress tested it to see if it will stop sort of malvertising or anything. And then he also suggested something called U-Matrix, but he also noted that that's only if you're savvy, which sounds like a challenge. So I'm gonna have to go and check out this U-Matrix business at some point. Let me scroll through here. Okay, so what I want to, hold on, I want to go back. Come
Okay.
on, let me go back. Nope, not there. Back, I say. Okay, it's not. I was going to ask some questions about Just Ask Jackie, but it didn't make our top 10 this
Not.
week. However, I will say teaser, I believe it is in our top 10 on the year to date so far. So maybe something that we end up talking a bit more about as we move forward. Can you give me the 1 minute explanation of what that is, Steph?
It's similar. It's that's one of the reasons why it's being categorized. And if I remember right, I'd have to go back and double check. I think that's one of the threats that's being distributed as a PDF editor, if I remember correctly. And there's a lot of threats that are currently being distributed as these PDF editors.
Malicious PDF editors and steganography are just like, they're everywhere
Old
right
time,
now.
it's also kind of old school.
It's funny though, because steganography is not old school. Steganography was like a thing that they said was gonna happen and like kind of never did, and now it's like actually happening quite a lot. Anyway, sorry, I got off track. Steph, you created a new PDF Slack emoji the other day to celebrate the amount of malicious PDF loaders that we've been seeing.
It's so many. It's so many. So I went to go take a look at some of the other kinds of downloads or file paths that we've seen. So Just Ask Jackie is one of them, which is why it's called that. But there are some others. Ask Betty How. We've seen some Sudoku based downloads. So the lures for this vary, which is one of the reasons why it's getting sort of included in conversations about these adware Trojan horse programs, in that it's downloading an installer that's masquerading as something more legitimate. Um, and I know that one of the ways it's different is that Just Ask Jackie will go on to establish persistence, which I don't believe that we've seen Tampered Chef do. I don't think we've seen it do like scheduled tasks or anything like that, but Just Ask Jackie does. I don't want to get too in the weeds for it, especially if it's something that we're going to talk about more later, and I would need to go brush up on it a little bit more. But it's interesting that right now there do seem to be a proliferation of these threats that are masquerading as these kinds of downloaders, and it's proving to be very effective. We talk about this a lot. I think there's these cycles and everything old is new again. I know we've talked about that on here for USB threats and for coin miners and
Malvertising, SEO
advertising,
poisoning.
and it just there are these things that kind of cycle through. And so apparently it's just time. It's time for Trojan horse, fake installers, and masquerading as legit tools to become popular again.
Here's an idea. Like, why doesn't every operating system have a built-in, easy to find, obvious to use, obvious that it exists, like file converter tool that you can use so you don't have to go on the web and use a PDF converter that spits out a Trojan on the back end when you use it. Like I just, there's so many things that like, why do these problems exist when they are so easy to solve? Looking through these comments once more, just one last time. What you say, Chris?
I was going to ask, we have very little time left, but I was going to ask the significance of seeing Akira on the list after not seeing a ransomware group on the list for so many years. Is that just something with like classifications or like the granularity of reporting?
There could be a lot of different reasons for that. I did take a look back at it. And some of it is just that we saw an uptick in Akira activity. And that's sometimes that's the main reason why something will end up in our top 10. There can be a variety of reasons, but I think one is that we just happened to see an uptick in Akira activity last month.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time since I can remember seeing any ransomware in the top 10 of anything that we've published. Like maybe going all the way back to like Ryuk, like way back.
The last one was, if I remember right, WannaCry in November of 2021.
Okay. All right, let's take one last.
Oh no, we're at time. We
Well,
can take a last question.
there's not really any more questions. People are just suggesting that the reason there's not a PDF converter on every operating system is because it won't make anyone any money, which I can sympathize with, I suppose. But you know, sometimes people need to be forced to do things for security that might not make them money. So we'll close with that.
Skip ahead, slide.
What'd you say? Oh
Skip
yeah,
ahead.
we do have one more slide. I should have been on this the whole time. All right. So thanks everybody for coming again. Next week, I think Keith and Dave will be back. They're going to be here with Jesse talking about AWS CLI tools. Check out our YouTube channel. Check out our blog. And thank you all so much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Steph. Thanks, Chris. Enjoy the rest of your days.